session today, Women Who Code Cloud presents Ask Me Anything series, transitioning to a cloud role with Linda Vivah. So today we have with us Linda, and I will just pass the time on to her so that she can introduce herself to all of you here. Linda, please.
Hi, everyone. Hello from New York. It's daytime here, about 12 p.m. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for doing this. This will be kind of casual, so please ask questions. I want to be able to answer any throughout. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm located in New York. I've always been in New York. So on that end, kind of always been here. I started out not in tech. I had an untraditional journey into tech. I currently work as a site reliability engineer at a media company. But to how I got there, I first started out in college. I was a philosophy major, and I thought I would go to law school. So completely different than where I ended up. I started actually working in TV production post-college, thought I would be studying for my LSATs and then going to law school. But that didn't happen. I ended up stumbling across coding. I taught myself for a year and then quit the TV production job, went to a coding bootcamp and started post that bootcamp as a JavaScript developer building web applications. So I wasn't in the cloud area. I was really starting more front end, then kind of shifted into full stack, mostly dealing with JavaScript. And because, we started using frameworks, if you're familiar, like Node.js, I started doing more API work and backend work too. And we were adopting into the cloud, specifically Amazon Web Services. And I ended up dabbling with that a lot and fell in love. And then I did that for 5 years, but within those 5 years, I started teaching I started getting more into cloud computing and taking certifications, but I didn't have a way to apply it. And I think that was where I kind of want to share my experience also and help anyone who's kind of trying to transition, either if you're starting out or looking to get into cloud. I recently, like a year ago now almost, I started a new role as a site reliability engineer in the same company I was working at as a JavaScript developer. And transitioning I work for a big company, like corporate. So transitioning could sometimes be hard. There's sometimes red tape, but navigating that was something that I personally have experience in. So if you have questions, if you're working in a specific company and want to transition into cloud, I'm more than happy to also answer questions on that too. As far as what my job is, so my job is site reliability engineering, SRE. The job itself is something that was kind of invented by Google. It is a cloud job, but there are so many different roles in cloud, and it could be so overwhelming to figure out what direction you want to go and exactly how to do that. I think especially with web development, I personally find that there's a lot more of a process that maybe you could follow or some proven school. In cloud, I find that people come from so many different backgrounds also, and sometimes even going from development to, cloud versus IT to cloud, you have different gaps to fill. So for me, coming from a non-IT background, I had a lot more fundamentals to fill for myself, and kind of doing that has been kind of an awesome journey. And, we're always learning. So that's kind of the gist of it. As far as what I do from a day-to-day, site reliability engineering is pretty much treating operations of a company as a software problem, right? So that's kind of the gist of it. I would say it's defined differently in different companies, but I don't want to talk too much without, I don't know if this is a little over, if that's what people want to know about. So if you didn't answer the poll, please do. I see some of you have answered. Awesome. So I'm just taking a look at that real quick. And I would love to get your questions, know about what you're trying to do, and be able to offer any advice I could give too. So definitely drop the questions in below. Where do I see there we go. So I see some of you are, majority beginner and 25% intermediate. Awesome. That's awesome. Let's see. So I see a question here from Uman. My background is in econ, and I don't have any specific IT experience, mainly international sales and account manager. Now, is there a possibility for me to take part in an AWS Practitioner course? Although I'd like to do this, I have my doubts. Could you give me some advice? So the cloud, I'm assuming you're referring to AWS Cloud Practitioner certifications. So that is a foundational cloud certification for anybody who doesn't know, for Amazon Web Services. AWS has many certifications. And they're a great way to use them as a guide. I personally use them as a guide. Is it going to get you a specific job? It could help you get the job. You need like to show some sort of experience too, which you could build. And I have advice on that too. But I think the certifications are a great way to get started because it gives you a kind of like a very specific roadmap, and especially Cloud Practitioner is fundamental. So even if you're a manager and you're dealing with anything in cloud, I recommend taking that if you're dealing with AWS, although there's a lot of overlap as far as concepts between different cloud providers. So yeah, I definitely recommend doing that. I don't think I think also it's not that much studying for Cloud Practitioner, it's more theoretical. So for me, I'm always like that. I definitely recommend it's more like fundamental knowledge, even when you're talking to somebody. I think it's very good certification to take. And by the way, a lot of people I work with who've gone to cloud are in completely different backgrounds, and there's so many transferable skills from econ. Don't let that also stop you from doing that or feel in any way like you can't, there's a lot of transferable skills in that time they put in a different career. And I say that from experience. A job in cloud is not just like the knowledge of cloud. There's communication, there's documentation, there's knowing how to work in a team. And a lot of it is trying to kind of meander silos in a way, right? And bring people together and be proactive about solving problems. And pretty much for me, like as an SRE, I'm keeping prod, prod is my goal, I'm trying to make sure it's always up, right? But like, how do we see the metrics? How do we make things and automate things? Like that's kind of where my mind is at. And I think like that requires a lot of talking to many teams. So you coming from a different path is an asset. Let me see. What's the best path into cloud solution architect? Bootcamp, how to network, anything companies in HR look for in particular? So great question. Solution architecture, I would say from what I've seen, also, I don't work as a solution architect, but that's something I personally had a goal of doing. And I've spoken to so many people in that. So I can tell you my experience. I know people personally who have not had like prior, let's say specifically cloud computing experience and have become solution architects at places like AWS, but they are in programs that almost like for a year teach them. So they're like in an entry level type of solution architect role. I've seen that. Is it doable to just jump? Yes, I recommend doing probably some certifications and building resume, building projects. For that, I recommend also following the Cloud Resume Challenge. You can find it on Twitter or look it up. It's kind of like it helps you kind of get started. But as far as solution architect itself, it really depends on the level you're going for. Personally, I think like there isn't like one defined way because you deal with so many different responsibilities as a solution architect. And there's a bunch of a combination of skill sets. So I don't think there's a best way. I think try to figure out what things you already have that you can leverage and then figure out where the gaps are. For me, I felt like I needed more hands-on cloud computing experience. And actually my end goal is solution architecture, but I really felt like in those interviews, I needed that was the gap for me. And that's exactly why I switched to an SRE role. Because I was kind of practicing and doing these like labs, but how much can you do without doing it at scale in an enterprise kind of, environment? And so I knew I needed to get my hands-on access to AWS accounts in corporate if my goal was to be in corporate solution architecture, right? Like that, and dealing with clients that are in corporate. So that's kind of like that was why I shifted into SRE. So it's a great question. I think there's no right answer. I've seen people do it in a few different ways. So for me, that's my gap, right? That's where I felt like, okay, now I'm able to really go in and automate things and really be hands-on. And that kind of put me in a different place when I'm talking about projects in an interview, although like totally doable without that. Sorry, if I didn't answer that fully, just feel free to like kind of follow up in the chat. What question am I on? Yeah, and I would say from an HR perspective, actually a lot of companies are embracing that non-traditional background too, and diversity, equity, and inclusion also includes different paths into a career. And I think that that's part of it. Like, I think just being able to show that you could do the job, but it's less about like the theory. It's like showing more hands-on experience or that you could do it and that you've put the work into it. Can you speak more about your coding bootcamp experience? Which one did you choose? Why did you choose it? Did it prepare you for the job market? That's a really great question. So I went to the Flatiron School in New York City. At the time, it was a full stack web immersive, and it was a 4-month program in person. Now they have an online program as well. And when it comes to boot camps, in my opinion, it's also always what you put into it and get out of it, because you have to be putting the work. So my recommendation is, if you do the boot camp route, it's almost like the best way to get your money's worth, which is, it's very worth it personally from my experience, is prepare as much as you can prior with any fundamentals you can, because it's very fast paced. For me, Flatiron School helped also with the job search. I actually ended up going back to the same media company I worked for before in production, because speaking of transferable skills, I had other experience that I kind of felt like I understand the user, and building these products for the same users on the other end was a good transition for me. And that was a faster transition for me. And entry-level jobs are, in my opinion, sometimes harder to get sometimes, because try to do the things that you're able to leverage on past experience too. So as far as the coding bootcamp question, it was worth it for me. It's very much what you get out of it. It made me, it's a fast-paced way to get your foot in the door. I personally wanted the community too, because I think community is really important when you're learning something, and that was really why I went to a boot camp. But it's doable without that. Personally, if you want to do it fast, and you have to also almost test the boot camp. Not all boot camps are created equal, I would say. So definitely also see the culture and the teachers and stuff like that. Let's see.
I think there's a question above that, the one that says, hi, I have a tech or engineering background with 1.5 years of work experience.
Sorry, which one?
By Abdul. So it's above April's question.
Oh yeah, what are the expectations from an entry-level candidate going into an interview? Also, do I need to have extensive whiteboarding algorithm experience? Okay, great question. I could tell you, so I work for Fox. We do not do a whiteboarding thing for these roles, but we do have, depending. I would say it depends also on the team. Every team kind of defines that differently. I know AWS interviews, they'll ask you, depending on the role, if it's a solution architect role, they'll ask you more about and depending on the level also, more what would you do and customer solutions, and kind of seeing if you know how to solve something and be able to architect it. So I would say not extensive, but for coding jobs, yes, maybe many companies do ask algorithm questions. I recommend LeetCode and other type of there's a lot of that, and I'm more than happy to send you some links. But you could DM me on Instagram. I could send you links. My username is @LindaVivah, and more than happy to send you that. But I wouldn't say extensive. I would say you have to know what job you're applying for. So if you're going to FANG, yes, you need to probably practice some of that. I can't speak specifically because I don't work in FANG, but I know from many friends in the industry that they do have to do that, especially for coding jobs, like programming. But entry level also, depending, some also there's a lot of apprenticeship programs and other types of programs that also might be a bit different with the interview process. So, or if you intern somewhere, it could vary. I wouldn't say it's a must everywhere. Brittany asks, I recently got AWS Developer Associate certification and gaining hands-on experience in the job. What would you suggest as next steps regarding getting more certifications and updating resume geared towards cloud? That's a great question. Brittany, can I ask, are you currently working in cloud, or are you're looking to transition into a cloud role, or you're in a cloud role and just want to gain more experience? I don't know if can she comment technically? Oh yeah, currently in cloud role but want more experience. I mean, if you have the developer associate, I would definitely recommend doing the professional level, but it depends if you're depending also if you want to shift your responsibilities or not. If you're just looking to kind of, improve on the path you're on, I personally would do a professional level certification, because they ask, it's just a guide, right? I don't think certifications are it's good for the company and it's very good for your resume, but it's also the knowledge base out of that is really the point. So I think there's some really in-depth courses, like there's one from Dolphin Ed that is probably much longer, but it has like a lot more labs on the professional level. And I think it pushes you to that place. So anything that gives you that kind of guide, and I would use it really as a guide to retain that information. So I would say the professional track, and if you could take this certification, that would be great. Especially also if the company funds it, that's even better. I know, so for example, one thing I've done to kind of up my own skills is I teach in my own job, right? Like, so I do lunch and learns and create tracks for certifications and do study groups, and hearing other people's questions and being able to learn together, and especially applying it to your company and the problems that maybe you specifically have in the company that you want to solve and skill sets you need is really beneficial, because different companies use different technologies or maybe architectures, and you might want to gear towards what your company needs to progress in that route in the ladder. So that's my 2 cents, but feel free to like comment if I didn't answer that also. Okay, how much can you gain out of certs? Oh wait, I skipped, sorry, one question.
The next one should be Aris.
Aris, sorry.
Yeah. So hi Linda, when jumping
into cloud, most courses certs target one specific provider. Any recommendations for gaining a general overview of practical cloud technologies without getting locked into a specific provider, or is transitioning between something like AWS and Azure a smooth experience? So personally, like I have many friends in the industry who have shifted like to Google Cloud from AWS. Are there some differences? Absolutely, like yes, but I think the fundamentals are there, and like it's almost like shifting coding languages. I would say it's probably like a little bit of a, it's a few things to learn, but it's not, let's say it's not restarting anywhere. Like it really is transferable. They might call it different things, and there might be different, but as far as like best practices, those are, I would say, pretty standard. Like I know a lot of people who were like only in AWS who moved to Google Cloud and had zero experience with Google Cloud, and they're in senior roles at Google. So definitely from what I've seen, it's a smooth experience, and I know not 1 or 2 people who've done that. And also with things like Terraform and all these other things, many people are using multi-cloud. So you'll see a lot of kind of a mix of services sometimes, depending on the project and what they're building. Let's see, best of my knowledge. Thanks, Linda. One more question to Human. To the best of my knowledge, there are quite different fields in AWS cloud consulting. Is there anything like AWS sales or so? Could you please explain what are the main criteria to master it? So I wouldn't say I'm like a guru on the sales end, but I could tell you that I know people like more the cloud sales end that work with me, and on Fox is the client, right, for AWS, and they have foundational knowledge, and they actually have certifications too, and so they could speak on it. They might not be the solution architect that comes in and gives you the technical advice, like more specific ones, but they help navigate that, so they have a good, I would say, doing more general ones. So like solution architect certifications are great to like kind of give you a guide for that, and the kind of anything fundamental. They might not be like the person that specializes in security or whatnot, but and it depends. I guess they might have also, I might be wrong about this as far as sales, because they might have specific teams that do have specific niched ones, but I know from my experience on working with them that just knowing how to speak to a customer in technical terms is really important. But I can't give you like the full. I definitely recommend also speaking to somebody who's in that kind of role. What's a typical day like for you as a site reliability engineer? Is any part of your role client facing? So I work on the publishing end of a media company. So the technologies we're responsible for are all the publishing tools for lots of live events and news and sports and entertainment sites. So for me, my client in a way are the editors, are the people using it to publish. And so I kind of look at it like you always kind of have a client, but it's not, yes, it's not client facing, because I don't work for like AWS or something like that. I'm working internally in the company, but the team I work for is kind of building shared services for editors and for all these other employees in the company. So they are our stakeholders. They're our client pretty much. And a typical day, like for me, it's a good mix. A lot of it is very proactive because site reliability engineering, it could be defined differently in many companies. I know some site reliability engineers that don't code. I personally code a lot because it depends on where you are also as far as team size and what you're building. For us, it's a lot of everything from documentation to building integration of observability to be able to monitor if everything's up and reliable. So as my title so I know I'm going to backtrack because I think there's also confusion about what site reliability engineering means. And I've seen a lot of different definitions. So for my purposes, I'll also define that so it's kind of clear. So my concern always is prod, and I want it to be reliable. Now, what does that mean? I pretty much, to do that, I need to make sure there's no wall between ops and developers. And in my kind of responsibility is more making sure we're able to monitor and in a way treat ops as a software problem and be able to see what we could automate and what we could document better and what we could kind of remove all those silos that exist. I know DevOps in general that's what DevOps also does. And there's a lot of also confusion about what that means compared to SRE, but SRE is more of a role that really is responsible, has a specific best practice. Google wrote a book, I think behind me, about site reliability engineering and kind of what the best practices, but I've seen many DevOps people kind of practice SRE. So the lines kind of shift. As far as my day-to-day, some days are a lot more meetings. Some days I have no meetings. A lot of my job right now, I'm building a lot of integration for New Relic, dashboards for us to see how everything is, the health of our systems and when we deploy, automating a lot of things. So for me personally, I am coding a lot more, probably maybe than a different SRE who works in a larger team. I'm the only SRE on my team and I'm under a DevOps type group. So for me, it's a little different than maybe a different site reliability engineer. So I'm kind of identifying how I can make their life easier, how I can improve communication, how doing a lot of proof of concepts, and ultimately trying to avoid mistakes and things failing and being proactive about it. So a lot of trying to figure out and talking to a lot of different teams and analyzing things that do go wrong. And monitoring that, which just having that monitoring is important. And sometimes there are many things that aren't monitored properly. So that's a whole kind of thing in itself, and figuring out what to prioritize within that. It's a lot of a cross team type of communication. I hope that answered it. I know that was a ramble. Currently in a cloud world, but want more experiences. Oh yeah, sorry, that was from the previous one. Lolly is asking, how much can you gain just out of certs without having hands-on company experience in cloud? So I personally credit certifications for giving me that stepping stone. Did it land me the role? No, but I used it as a tool to land a role. So what do I mean by that? I personally, when I was starting out, I knew that I wouldn't have where to implement it because there is a bit of separation sometimes in many companies between developers and ops, and we're working on making it more streamlined. And that's why SREs exist, but and other roles for that. But for me personally, hands-on experience is crucial to land that role. I don't think you could do it without it, but if it's entry level, you could use the certification as a guide. And to me, I always look at the certification as a guide. So I pretty much made the certification concept a way for me to communicate with other people in the company who were in the teams that I wanted to be on, and be able to study together and learn from them and find out about the projects they're doing, and be able to almost learn a lot more, in a more realistic way of what's happening in the company that I'm already at. So I started a lunch and learn at the company I work for, and ended up having 200 people in that lunch and learn. And it was a weekly lunch and learn. And sometimes the best way to learn is to teach, and that's in anything in tech, I think. And that kind of opened the door for me to be able to land a different role and learn about what role I want to do and stuff like that. So I do think certifications are very helpful, and it's not the only thing maybe to land a role, but it's definitely an asset and a guide for you to land a role. I also recommend looking at Cloud Resume Challenge, and build things, maybe even an Alexa skill or something very simple that has good documentation and, something that you could be more hands-on, that you don't need to be dependent on any other team to do. That's my advice. So there's a lot of like projects you can kind of build that are more self-sufficient. How much can you gain just, any other paths? As far as, like, I just want to make sure I'm answering your question. Did that answer that? Or when you're saying any other paths, like are there other paths to use certifications? I see a question. Hi, Linda. Could you elaborate on your transition from being a philosophy major to switching into a tech career? What study and job searching skills do you have to learn successfully make the transition? How long did it take you to figure out which particular tech role you want to work in? So I would say like the transitions are always sort of fluid. I think goals in tech careers change over time. Like my goal initially when I graduated from a coding bootcamp are not the same than me 6 years post. But I knew I wanted to get into the industry and I started with web development. I actually wasn't 100% sure that was the path I would go in, but it was what initially I knew I could land an entry-level job in and get my feet into a more technical role. And my transition from philosophy major was very funny. I mean, I worked in a completely different industry. I didn't take one computer science class in college. I always say I wish I did, right? Like you always kind of wish you started earlier, but I'm thankful for like the journey I've had. So I started with building a website actually for something that was needed for work because I was out of college doing a lot of random things, like at my job, like TV production, you kind of deal with everything and anything sometimes. So I've had like, so many funny experiences and just random things I've done. One of them was building a book website out of nowhere for one of the talents. And I started dabbling with code because of that, because they wanted something custom. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And totally fell in love. I realized that I wanted to go to law school because I wanted to learn. I liked studying. And technically being in tech is like being a professional student. And I didn't know if I would be happy as a lawyer, but I think what drew me specifically initially to law was the studying part, the learning part. But when I, started coding, I was just like in love and couldn't imagine really doing anything else. And it's the best decision I ever made. I look back, like I have 2 kids, I have flexible life. I feel like my work has depth to it. I enjoy it. I don't know. I would do this for free, and not that I should, right? We shouldn't do that for free. But my point is, like, I love it in that capacity. And I think it's fun to solve problems. It's fun to build products, and of course, it's also the teams you're on and the culture you have. But once if you're in the right place, it's fulfilling. And how long did it take you to figure out? Yeah. So as far as figuring out the tech role that I wanted to do, I actually thought I would go to mobile development initially, and then ended up seeing that a lot of need was in web development in corporate, and there weren't mobile teams sometimes in some of the companies I was looking at. And so I kind of geared towards what I could land faster. And I think when you start in development, I mean, you kind of need programming for many things, and you could shift. You could constantly shift into different things. I definitely did, and I definitely also went in circles, enjoying VR and AI and thinking I would go into other things, and dabbled with things till I landed on, I want to do, cloud. I really want to niche into AWS, and I want to be a solution architect. And we'll see even if that ends up being the role, because I might learn some, there's so many new roles that come about over time. Oh, how long did your transition into the web development job take from the time you decided you're going to do it? Okay, that's a great question. Initially, when I started, when you're dabbling with something, you aren't sure if it's the career for you, maybe you want to learn more. So one thing I utilize is actually meetups, Women Who Code, and a bunch of different meetups for me to be able to learn more about what's out there, right? And the transition itself, I would say from that time to really quitting my job to then go to a coding boot camp was probably a year, because I was kind of going to a lot of meetups after work and teaching myself and seeing if this is what I want to do as a career. And for me, like that year was kind of like, it kind of grew as I was going to more meetups, as I was meeting more people in the industry. It didn't feel also as lonely, and I didn't have anybody around me that was in tech. And so it felt scary. It felt very overwhelming. So I needed that confidence to do that, and community is very important. And having groups like this is crucial. Like, it really helped me make that transition. And so I definitely recommend taking advantage and you know, networking with people, and just even listening to a bunch of different people who their experiences, and you will have an epiphany sometimes of like what you want to do. But yeah, that's kind of like how, and I wouldn't overwhelm yourself with the end goal sometimes. I would just kind of go step by step. If you don't know where you want to go in tech, or specifically what you want to niche into in cloud, you know, just start with showing up to certain meetups, checking out this, you know, like, don't overwhelm yourself. Sometimes the answers come to you. Dear Linda, can you please kindly tell, do you think the AWS Cloud Practitioner certificate plus sales experience could be sufficient for the mentioned sales role in cloud, or more certificates are necessarily needed? So I would say from what I've seen, and I don't work in sales, but I could tell you from what I've seen, some companies require, so a company like AWS, if you don't have a certification for solution architect and you're working in sales, I believe they will help you do it on the job. So to get the job, you don't necessarily maybe sometimes need it, but they will ask you to get it in a specific amount of time, because that's AWS itself, right? Is every company that way with sales? I'm not 100% sure. But to interview, you don't need all the certifications. I believe I haven't seen, from the job postings I've seen in cloud in general, few actually say required. A lot of times it's just showing the ability to be able to learn it. They might require it on the job, but not in the interview process. Last question. How do I showcase my new skills into LinkedIn while on current job role? Tech, but not cloud related at all, without raising suspicion or getting fired. Oh no, they should not fire. That's a good thing. I feel like learning new skills is a good thing. But yeah, if you want to do it in a more, I think first of all, there's a way to not notify when you update LinkedIn, but I would put it under projects. And also if you do any LinkedIn courses, I feel like, I don't know what your current role is, by the way, but are you completely out of tech? Does the company have a tech team? I guess that's my question to you, because I'm wondering if the suspicion is because you're learning something technical, or because maybe you're on a specific team and they don't want you to move to a tech team and they see you like, you know, computer hardware design. Okay. I don't think it would raise suspicion if you're doing like certain, like adding projects or doing certain courses and having them completed, but you could turn off the notification so it doesn't notify anybody. They would have to manually look at your LinkedIn to see that. So, and in general, I feel like in tech, from what I've seen, and people who work in tech, like it's pretty embraced to always teach yourself something new. And if they aren't embracing it, I would question the environment. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, and any questions if you think of after this, feel free to also ping me. I'm more than happy to answer in more detail. Thanks a lot for your time. Oh, sorry. You know what? I'm gonna do an AMA on my stories, because the DMs are a disaster. But I'll probably the best place is the comments. I answer comments much more than DMs, but I'll do an AMA after this weekend, I promise. You briefly mentioned Terraform earlier, but what are some of the tools, technologies you use daily to support your role? Great question. So I would say to support my role, I'm also doing currently proof of concepts of new tools. So for me, a lot of like, as far as like what I use in Amazon Web Services, like I'm integrating now Lambda layers to Relic, Datadog. I mean, a bunch of people, so observability for me is really important. So Splunk, I'm kind of doing also a lot of proof of concepts for new things we want to use within those services. I I use personally CloudFormation and Terraform because some teams use Terraform and some are still only using CloudFormation. So, you know, I think as far as like learning tools, Terraform is a very good tool to learn. GitHub Actions is also really important for automation, and just in general is so powerful, and something I recommend in general also for any cloud role to also be familiar with. And as far as languages, I use Python now. I came from JavaScript, but more Python, Vim and scripting, you know, like stuff like that. My daily tools. What else? Of course, AWS. Yeah, and a lot of also, like, for example, we're looking to maybe shift into containers, like a lot of like proof of concepts too. I do a lot of research and development currently. Not every SRE does that. I mean, I think definitions change, but and documentation. So I use a lot of like, you know, GitHub just to document and, you know, bash and stuff like that. Oh, sorry, I totally missed some questions. My apologies. Questions are missed. Let's see. How did you prepare when you took AWS Cloud Practitioner exam? Were you in school? Were you working already? Great question. So the company I worked for, I was working as a web developer. Within that time, I was studying post-work, but like personally, they were very supportive of taking time to learn a new skill always. And so I actually also did lunch and learns during work hours and was studying during work too, because it was very much in line with what I was doing. Cloud Practitioner exam, I would say, is also foundational, so it shouldn't be too intensive to do. I would say also even after work or in between. My recommendation is to maybe put like 30 minutes also blocking on your calendar and like doing some sort of module and just being consistent, because a lot of the concepts build on each other. And some companies also fund a course, or they expense it, or they fund the certification. So that's another thing. So in my case, that was the case. They did fund the certification, even though I was not in a cloud role. So I think you would find a lot of teams, even if you're not in cloud, very supportive of making sure you increase your skills, because we need to always kind of stay on top of some things, although it's impossible to stay on top of everything. But if you're looking to niche into something, I definitely think it would be met with support. And can you give tips? Next question. Hi, Linda. Can you give some tips for the first interview in computer science, software engineering jobs? So I would say studying for interviews and studying and working at a job are two different things, in my opinion, right? Like, I think interviewing is very much like it's almost like you have to train yourself to do well in interviews too. I recommend also interviewing as practice, and sometimes doing interviews in companies, maybe not your dream company, but like other companies that reach out maybe or something like that for practice. You might take the job, I wouldn't waste somebody's time, but I think it's important to do a lot of interviews. So if you're on the cusp of doing more than one interview and aren't sure, I would do it. I think you get better over time with interviews. Also, every company is different, and their strategy and process is different. Even like AWS and Google have a very different, like there's small things you need to know, like Google likes using we, or Amazon or Google likes Amazon likes we, you know, like when you're talking about a project, like small things like that. And there's definitely a lot of information on that too, on Glassdoor and all that. But I would say, as far as interview, depending on what I would define what specific roles you're looking for and kind of work backwards on what they usually have in their process, because some of the things are consistent. Some companies are a bit different, especially if you're interviewing for FANG, it might be a little more intensive. So there's definitely a process. Even the recruiters, they give you information to prepare for the interview, which so that you could also find online. You could kind of look that up. I have that too. So if you want me to send it for specific roles, I might have that. I'm happy to send that over. And it's all free and open source. But as far as interviewing for computer science, yeah, practice. I would say even do mock interviews. If you are going for a coding job, things like LeetCode and practicing like kind of solving certain problems that you might get in an interview. But there's also always a mix of like talking about yourself too. So definitely, depending on what your strength is, if you want to practice mock interviews, there's also some resources for that, and some good YouTube videos I could send you for that too. For some tips. Let's see, could you please give us a quick rundown of what your day-to-day tasks are like as an SRE? What exactly does it mean to work in the cloud? That is a good question, because believe me, I was asking that same question sometimes, like working in the cloud, like when we say that, what does that mean, right? What doesn't have cloud these days? I mean, over time, I think developers are now having to know cloud related skills, even when they're not working in like that end, right? But so I think working in cloud, when I'm saying working in cloud personally, I'm talking about roles that are more, I guess, DevOps or cloud engineer or support roles, things that are, I guess, categorized on a list when you're looking. I'm basing it off job search, but if I was looking at a non-formal definition of working in cloud, I think there are people who work in cloud without having a cloud role specifically. When I say cloud role, that could be, and again, there's cloud engineer, you know, there's so many roles that are also being born. So I think it's so working in cloud is anything I would say that you're using day-to-day, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, or anything that's, or system administration, anything that you're using those tools, I would say. That's personally, I would define it, but I'm sure maybe there's other people who would define it differently. And there's actually debate about a lot of this stuff. So you'll see a lot of definitions depending on I would base it off the company you're in or looking to work in, and kind of work based off their definition. So look at the jobs postings, I would say. And yeah, as far as the day-to-day, for me, like today, I actually have like a number of meetings for some reason after this, but usually I start my day actually 30 minutes studying. I do like, I'm always studying for a certification or something, or trying to, I'm also like, I'm the first year in a new job. So I'm really trying to make sure I have the fundamentals. I don't come from IT. So there's a lot of gaps I personally have identified. I think that takes time to identify your gaps and figure out what you need to do to fill them and to have a better understanding. Because coming from, let's say, a web developer role, a lot of the ops end seemed magical to me. But I come with other things. I'm treating ops as a software problem. And I have other, like I've used New Relic as a developer, but maybe not as a, you know, on the ops end or trying to integrate it into the AWS infrastructure. So making sure I have those fundamentals, understanding some networking, just for me, like I personally need the macro, everybody's different. I need to like, you know, it never ends, but I need to understand certain things like fundamental. And I know I had those gaps now coming from IT. So that for me, I always put time for learning. And yeah, we have like sprints. So we have agile workflow where we do have tickets every 2 weeks, but when you work sometimes in a team like ops, you're putting out fires a lot. So my job is a lot internal on the team. I would say I less do stuff for other stakeholders or clients and more try to make the ops team more their life easier and have the right alerting and be proactive and add automation and document things and have proper tagging and do a lot of proof of concepts for things that we want to potentially use or tools we want to use, CloudFormation template updating, like a lot of that. So I would say my job is to also really just make the site more reliable. So my focus is prod. It's less about like dev or stage. You know, my focus is more like analyzing that. Oh, they have a personal, they have a Persian background. I'm Middle Eastern. I'm not Persian. I have a lot of friends who actually speak Farsi. I'm not Persian. My parents are like they immigrated from Israel and they're Iraqi Jews. So that's, but I have a mix of things. I'm Middle Eastern. My dad speaks Arabic and stuff like that. So lots of languages. Awesome. Any other questions? I don't know if we're at time, but if just putting it out there, if you have more questions, I'll probably do, I could also put my email in here, but let me put my email in here. Linda, can you please share the links for mock interview workshops? Yeah, I could send a few resources and a few friends of mine who actually document it better than I do. So I'll send it to you. If you want to email me, I'm putting the email here, and feel free to email me with that and I'll send that over. Let me just put that here. Linda Vivah, gmail.com, and feel free, just put in the title mock interview links, and so I make sure I see it. And, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of content on Instagram as well. At Linda Vivah is my handle. I'll put it in here. And I share a lot of like more cloud computing resources, but also coding. And yeah, feel free. I'm not the best at DMs, but comments, I answer comments better. And AMAs on stories. Thank you all. And yes, shout out to Women Who Code Cloud Slack channel. Definitely join that. I'm on there too. So actually, if you want to ask me questions, that might be the best place. That might be the best place. So I recommend joining the Slack channel. And check out the upcoming events. I'm going to be joining the book club and a few of the other ones. They sound so cool. I'm so happy that you guys did this. Thank you for having me. Thanks to everyone who joined. And I'll hand it over to you, Charmaine, for any last words. But thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Linda, for that. I've learned so much from you. Yep, so please do join us on Slack. I send the link in the chat. Let me just send it again. And you can connect with Linda on there. So you can just find her name on our Slack channel. And yes, hope to see all of you in our future events. And maybe you can join our book club too. And then you might see Linda there. And yep. Hope to see all of you on our Slack and future events. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, all. Have a great Friday.
Thanks, Charmaine. Can you stop the meeting? Yeah, thank you. Good night.